Story time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. Growing up, I was really awkward. My parents always used to call me the ugly duckling, but my dad told me not to worry that when I would grow up, I would become beautiful. Honestly, this really stuck to my head, and I am very beautiful now. I used to have braces, acne. My hair has always been curly, but I didn't know how to treat it back then. My mom had really straight hair, so she had no idea how to do my hair either. And this was the toughest thing for me. I would show up to school with knots in my hair because I didn't even know how to brush it. Eventually, my mom did start taking better care of my hair, which really helped. I also didn't know how to dress for my body. I wore big hoodies, big t-shirts, while the other girls in my high school dressed for their body type. I honestly just had no clue. I did get bullied, but mostly by boys. I think the girls probably just felt bad for me, so I never really had problems with other girls. A group of boys would always bother me. One of them even asked me out pretending that he wanted to go out with me. Of course I said yes because I actually believed him. He asked me to go to the movies, and when I showed up, he wasn't there. I decided to go watch the movie anyway, but the next day in school, I couldn't hear the end of it. To my face, this guy called me stupid. A few days later, they made a list of the ugliest girls. Part 2 is story time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when the boys came out with the list of the ugliest girls in high school. What they did was pass around some flyers with all the names on it, and then they had people write the #1 ugliest girl on the list. As soon as I saw my name on the list, I wanted to die. I pretended I was sick and went home. There was this one girl who actually stood up for me and the rest of the girls, and she was actually one of the prettiest girls in the entire school. She told everyone to knock it off, but nobody listened to her. Instead, the boys added her to the list as well, but there was no way that she was going to get voted #1. I would show up every day to school that week wishing that I was dead. Finally, on Friday, they came out with the winner. And of course, everyone picked me. I was completely mortified, but I actually started laughing when I saw the list. It was like the stress from the entire week had finally accumulated, and my reaction was to just laugh. While they were all hoping that I was just going to break down and cry, I started to laugh in their faces. The teacher asked me what was wrong and I showed her the list. She ran over to the principal's office and everything became way too dramatic for me. So I literally decided to run away from school. When I got home, I told my parents everything. Part 3 is up. Is it normal that my father still hits me even as an adult? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, was sent me on Instagram. When I was a kid and I got in trouble, my dad would hit me. I always knew to expect it, so it wasn't a really big deal. But of course, I would do my best to stay out of trouble. Sometimes he would use a belt and sometimes he would slap me across the face. The slapping was the worst part. From the ages of 10 to 12, I didn't really get hit because I never got in trouble. When I turned 14, things started getting rough. I wanted to date boys and my dad was not having it. So his form of punishment sometimes was even taking food away from me. This happened on 2 occasions when I was 14 and I almost ran away because of it. I know most of you are thinking that my mom should have stepped in, but my mom was pretty afraid of my dad too. Sometimes I feel like my parents have brainwashed me into thinking that what my dad is doing is fine. The sad part is that I'm now 20 and my dad still hits me from time to time. I do have to say my father has always been there for me. He's provided me with a great life and a good education. And it's not like he would just hit me out of nowhere. It was only when I got in trouble and for specific reasons. But I do think he needs to stop it because I'm 20 now. Here's where things get really messy. I just got engaged and my fiance hates my father. Follow for part 2. Is it normal that my father still hits me as an adult? Now that I'm 20 and engaged, I told my fiance about what my father did. Like I said, my father wouldn't just hit me out of nowhere. He would only do it when he was punishing me and for specific reasons. But my fiance loathes my father. He thinks it's abuse and that it wasn't a normal thing for me to have to endure as a child, especially as an adult. And I've only come to realize that what my dad is doing is probably wrong because of my fiance. Before that, I never had anybody in my life tell me that what my dad was doing was wrong. But here's what happened. My fiance and I were cooking in my parents' kitchen. My dad must have been in a really bad mood because he comes into the kitchen and says, "If you don't clean up this mess, I'm gonna show your fiance how I slap the shit out of you." My father had never shown that side of him in front of my fiance. But as soon as those words came out of my father's mouth, my fiance turned to him and said, "You will never put your hands on her again." And my dad said, "That's my daughter and I can do whatever I want." My fiance asked me to leave with him and I did. My mom called us and begged us to come back, but my fiance said no. Part 3 is story time about how I got my manager fired because I didn't like him. Yeah, this might make me a terrible person, but a girl's gotta do what a girl's gotta do. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, was sent to me on Instagram. I started working as a wedding planner in a company about 6 months ago. And yes, I've always been very ambitious, but I definitely took it too far this time. In the company, there were other wedding planners as well, and we were all managed by the same person. Let's call him Tom. Tom was an okay manager. But here's the thing, when I met him, I hated him right away. He was lazy and incompetent, and I knew that I could do his job 10 times better. Then I hated him even more when I found out how much money he earned. He was making over $200,000 a year. After a week of working there, I realized what he was doing. He would tell all of the wedding planners to do things throughout the day that added up to being his actual job. But none of us realized it because he was telling all of us individually without the others knowing. But I'm really observant and I realized it right away. I started watching him all the time. He would come into the office really late, would make himself coffee, and practically eat an entire box of cereal at his desk. Once he was finished with that, he would email us our task for the day, which was the stuff that he needed to do. Then he would play video games for 5 hours. Part 2 is 2 of how I got my manager fired because I didn't like him. Does this make me evil? Yes. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me an Instagram. When I realized he was palming off all his work on the other people, I decided to start documenting all of his laziness. So like I said in part 1, he would spend his morning eating an entire box of cereal. Then he would send emails out telling us what to do for the day, which was everything he had to do for the day. Then for about 5 hours, he would play video games on his laptop. And how did I know this? Every 15 minutes or so, he would go get a snack. So I would run into his office and take a picture of his laptop. He didn't even bother to fake it. You might wonder why no one else noticed. My desk was the closest one to his office. Also, our boss worked remotely and would only come into the office about once a week. And when she would come into the office, he would act completely different. So after documenting all of his activities for about a month, I decided to go to the boss and show her everything. I kept every single text message he ever sent me of him asking me to do something for him. I had all the emails he'd ever sent us. I had videos of him eating a full box of cereal at his desk for about 2 hours. And I had all the pictures I took of his laptop while he was playing video games. And all of it was time-stamped. I asked my boss if we could jump on a call and she said yes. By the way, my boss is amazing. She's a total boss lady and doesn't take crap from anyone, so I knew that she would fire him right away. When we got on the phone, I asked her to check her email and she looked at all the evidence. Then she told me, wow, I'm actually not surprised. I told her that if she gave me the job, I would be extremely productive and get us more clients. She thanked me and called the manager right away. And guess what? The following day, he was not there. My boss called me and thanked me for being honest with her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I got my manager fired because I didn't like him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me an Instagram. When I finally got my manager fired the next day, my boss called me and thanked me for giving her all the evidence. But I didn't stop there. I asked her if she could consider me for his job and she told me that she would think about it. So I took it a step further. Emailed her the list of new clients that I had brought in and it did the trick. She emailed me back saying that she would give me a chance. That meant that I was now going to get $200,000 a year and that I didn't have to deal with bridezillas anymore. Since I became manager, I've doubled our client list and increased revenue by 12%. I also convinced my boss to give everyone a bonus. I even redecorated the entire office, making it more functional, and everybody loves the new space. I also got myself a fancy 2-bedroom apartment, which has a pool and a sauna, a doorman, and I get massages every single week. And I got myself a very new nice car. I'm currently planning a girls trip for me and my friends to go to Greece. I would have never been able to do all of this had I not gotten that job. So if you're wondering if I feel guilty about getting my manager fired, no, I don't. There's nothing more disgusting than a lazy man. I did check his Instagram after sending this story time. He's gained about 40 pounds and plays video games for a living. Not sure how that works, but good for me. Bye. Story time about how my fiance cheated on me with my niece who's 18 years old. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me an Instagram. My fiance and I have been together a total of 3 years. We got engaged exactly 1 year ago. When we first met, he was totally obsessed with me. He begged me to go out on dates with him, but I never said yes. We met through friends and my friends ended up giving him my address. So this man would send me gifts every single week. Started out with flowers, then he would send me champagne, then he started sending me designer bags. When I told my parents all of this, they were really impressed by his wealth. And ultimately, they convinced me to call him and thank him for the gifts. And when I did that, he begged me to go on a date with him. I was scared of being impolite, so I said yes. But looking back, I should have listened to my instinct and not gone on the date. We went on a total of 3 dates. And after that, he started talking about marriage. I told him it was way too soon and that I didn't even know if I had feelings for him. But of course, he insisted for months. My parents really pressured me into saying yes to being his girlfriend, so I did. After 6 months, I was finally starting to feel something for him. Here are a few reasons why I never really liked him. He was rude to all of the waiters and servers at restaurants. He talked bad about his mom and his friends to me all the time. And he would constantly talk down to other women. But like I said, finally, I was starting to like him a little bit. He asked me to marry him and everything was fine. Up until he met my 17-year-old niece. He started buying her designer bags and cell phones. Part 2 is up. 2 of how my fiance cheated on me with my niece. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. I was sending me an Instagram. When my fiance first met my niece, he would compliment her so much about her looks. He told her in front of my entire family that she was so beautiful and womanly for being so young. This made my family and I really uncomfortable. But my niece was super flattered. And before I knew it, he was buying her gifts. He went behind my back and bought her the latest iPhone. And then he gifted it to her at our next family event. My sister, who is my niece's mom, said no. She didn't want to accept the gift, but my niece begged her. The following weekend was my niece's birthday. That day, he gave her a Gucci purse. Once again, my sister said she couldn't accept that, but my fiance insisted. That's when he told me and my sister that he always wanted a daughter like my niece, and that he was so proud of her for doing so well in school. Obviously, he was lying. After my niece's birthday, I told my fiance to stop buying her gifts. I told him that it was incredibly inappropriate and that he needed to take them back. That's when he told me that he could do whatever he wanted and he didn't need my permission to give my niece gifts. By this point, I was falling out of love with him. This is when he started inviting my niece over to our house for dinners. He would cook lavish meals for my niece and I. This is also when he started taking her to the mall for shopping trips. And the only reason I found out was because I tracked his phone. Part 3 is up. 3 of how my fiance cheated on me with my young niece. When I tracked his phone, I saw that he was at the mall. I called him 5 times and he wouldn't answer his cell phone. Finally, I call my sister and I ask her if my niece is home. That's when she tells me my niece had left the house with her friends 4 hours ago. And that's exactly the amount of time that my fiance had been out of the house. I told my sister I was really concerned about the relationship between them and that we needed to look for them right away. By the way, how stupid is he not to realize that I could track him? My sister and I finally reached the mall, but they weren't inside. And we looked everywhere. We started looking through the parking garage and we finally found them. They were in his car full on making out. That's right, my 18-year-old niece and my 36-year-old fiance. My sister pulled my niece out of the car. My fiance jumped out of the car and started defending himself right away. That's when he said that my niece came on to him and that he was trying to stop her from kissing him. That's when my niece spills all the beans. She told us that for 2 weeks he had been taking her everywhere and buying her gifts, that he had even taken her to a hotel room for you know what. My sister called the cops, but the cops said they couldn't do anything about it because she was already 18. But her and I have a feeling that this all started before that. But my niece says no. My fiance, like the coward he is, he grabbed all of his stuff from my apartment that same night and left. And no, I haven't heard from him since. But I took all the money we had in our joint account. Over $200,000. Bye. Storytime about how I've never farted in front of my boyfriend and can't even poop if he's in my house, which led me to pooping in my car by mistake. Disclaimer is not my story time, was sent me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 months. We are so in love and we met through a dating app. He even moved into my apartment. I know some might say it's quick, but it's just meant to be. We are so in love. We get along super well. We're so attracted to each other. Our sexy time is like amazing, like the best I have ever had. And I was the one that asked him to move in with me and he said yes right away. I actually thought he was going to say no, but he was so down for it that I was so happy. Before he moved in, he actually would come over to my house all the time and he started farting in front of me. It was cute, funny, whatever. But I can't bring myself to doing it in front of him. I can't even poo when he's in my apartment, much less could I poo when I was at his. So I found myself having to hold it in all day long. Anytime we would go to a restaurant, I would try to go, but sometimes I just couldn't go because I knew that he was there. It's all become very complicated. Now that he moved into my place, we love watching movies. So we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and suddenly I felt the urge to go to the bathroom. There was no way I was going to go poop while he was there. Out of nowhere, I jump up and tell him that I have to go out. I get in my car, part 2 is up. Storytime about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend or even poop when he's in the same place as me, which caused me to poo in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. Out of nowhere, I jump off the couch and tell him I have to go to the supermarket. He offers to go for me and I said no. But in hindsight, I should have said, yeah, sure, you go, so that I could stay alone in the apartment by myself and go poo. I grab my keys and jump in the car. And then suddenly, I start pooping. I couldn't control myself. I couldn't believe it was happening right then and there. I stopped the car and pulled over and just pooped in my car. Luckily, I was wearing baggy pants, so you couldn't really notice it. Suddenly, I remembered I had an extra change of clothes in my car. I looked behind me and there it was, a pair of jeans. I take off my sweatpants and try to wipe myself as best as I could. And I actually went to a CVS, went into the bathroom, cleaned myself. I even bought baby wipes. Oh my god. I changed into the jeans and I got back in the car and went home. When I get home, my boyfriend says, "Did you just change?" Then I told him I ripped my pants somehow in the grocery store. And then he said, "You didn't bring anything back from the grocery store." And I didn't know what to say. Part 3 is up. Time about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend and this caused me to poop in my car by mistake. Disclaimer is not my story time, it was on me on Instagram. I told him that I had ripped my pants, so I changed into other pants. And then he asked, "But you didn't bring anything back from the supermarket." And I said, "Oh yeah, you're right." Then I told him that I went to CVS instead because I needed baby wipes, which I actually did buy them, so I showed them to him. But let's remember I had just pooped on myself, so I really wanted to take a shower. So I tell him, "Hey babe, I'm actually gonna take a shower because I just got my period." Then he says, "But you just had your period last week." I just kept digging a bigger and bigger grave. Then he sits me down and says, "What's going on?" I just couldn't lie anymore. And I told him the truth, that I had pooped in the car because I didn't want to poop in the apartment because he was there. That's when he started laughing maniacally and told me that I was being so stupid. To this day, I still can't fart in front of my boyfriend. And I still can't go to the bathroom. I'm not sure how to fix this or how to even go about actually doing it for the first time. So maybe you guys have some ideas. Also never going back to that CVS because I'm pretty sure I didn't put the pants in the trash and they were just lying on the floor and they saw me go in. What should I do? I walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. My boyfriend moved in with his gay best friend 6 months ago. Here's a little backstory. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 2 years. My boyfriend is a social butterfly. He has 1,000,001 friends. I got used to this very quickly because most of them were female and a lot of them were gay. They actually became my friends too in some cases. Early on in the relationship, I met one of his best friends. Let's call him Tim. Tim is very, very gay. And he doesn't hide the fact that he thinks my boyfriend is very attractive. I asked my boyfriend if Tim ever made him feel uncomfortable, and he said no. But here's the thing. Tim sometimes says the most outlandish things about my boyfriend. Yeah, my boyfriend is hot. He's super fit, has a great face, so Timmy loves to comment on his body all the time. On several occasions, he's made really dirty jokes about my boyfriend's butt and the things that he'd like to do to my boyfriend's butt. Every time they go out, he's always trying to get my boyfriend drunk. And when he succeeds, he always takes off his shirt. So then my boyfriend spends the rest of the night shirtless. Obviously, this bothered me, but it didn't bother me enough to ever be concerned. Boy, was I wrong. A few weeks ago, Timmy threw a party and told my boyfriend not to invite me. I got really upset, so I showed up anyway. Timmy was trying to kiss my boyfriend. Part 2 is up. Walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. I instantly knew the only reason I didn't get invited to the party was so that Tim could try to get with my boyfriend. But here's the thing. My boyfriend had so much patience for Timmy. Even though Timmy would make such perverted jokes about my boyfriend would laugh it off and tell me it wasn't a big deal. But I knew it did make him uncomfortable. But of course, I show up to the party anyway. When I got there, I found Timmy sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was clearly drunk, and Timmy was trying to kiss his neck. As soon as Timmy saw me, he got up from the couch and asked me what I was doing there. He said that it was a boys only party. When I looked around, it actually was. There were no other women there. I told Timmy that I was going to take my boyfriend home, and he said that I was overreacting and that my boyfriend was just having fun. I walk up to my boyfriend and he is so drunk, he doesn't even recognize me. I grabbed him and got him out of there. The next day, I told my boyfriend that Timmy was trying to kiss him when he was drunk. But of course, my boyfriend defended him. And my boyfriend confessed to me that he knows Timmy has a crush on him and that he's basically his best friend out of pity. Then my boyfriend actually told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Timmy. Part 3 is up. Walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. That's when my boyfriend basically told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Tim. I decided to ghost my boyfriend for 2 days because I was so upset at him. But here's the thing, my boyfriend was ghosting me too. So I decided to go over to his apartment because I hadn't heard from him in 24 hours. My boyfriend had given me a key to his apartment, by the way. But before I put in the key to unlock the door, I hear moaning sounds coming from inside. I instantly knew what was happening. Quickly unlocked the door and find my boyfriend getting banged on the couch by his gay best friend. It's an image I can never forget. I'm actually traumatized. They separate and my boyfriend comes running over to me. First thing out of his mouth was, "We were just experimenting, it's not a big deal." He thought I was gonna be like, "Oh, cool." I look over at Timmy and he's on the couch smiling. I couldn't help myself and I slapped my boyfriend really hard. I ran away and didn't talk to him for 2 days. He finally came over to my apartment after those 2 days and explained that it was just something experimental. And he swears that they've never done it before and that they never will again. I took him back, but I don't trust him. He says that Timmy will always be his best friend and that I shouldn't get jealous. What should I do? Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. I sent me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, "Wow, you're growing into your body," or "Wow, you got great hips." He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, "Ew." He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, "Oh, you know how he is." So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. It's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It's me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting. And that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13 and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle. Caught my neighbor trying to open my apartment door. Should I be worried? Disclaimers is not my Storytime instead of me on Instagram. I just moved into my new apartment 2 months ago. Everything's been completely normal and fine up until a few weeks ago. I went to my mailroom to pick up some packages and there happened to be one of my neighbors there. He says his name is Jerry and he actually introduced himself to me. I had never seen him before, but he just said, "Hey, how are you?" I said, "Hi." And then he said, "Are you new to the building?" And I confirmed that I was new to the building. That's when he said that I looked familiar to him and he asked me where I went to school. I told him where I went to school and then he started asking me more questions. But the more questions he asked me, the more I realized he was just trying to find me on Facebook. I didn't give him my last name or anything. But ultimately, this guy knows where I live, so I was just like, whatever. That's when he started recommending restaurants and cafes around our neighborhood. He just kept talking and talking and talking. I ended up standing there for 10 minutes listening to him talk until I told him I had to leave. That's when he said it was so nice to meet me and that he'd see me around. Keep in mind, he does not know what floor I live on at this point. Then a few days later, I see him again at the mailroom. I said hello, but I made sure to act like I was in a hurry. But of course, he had to stop me and we talked again for like 5 minutes. Follow for part 2. Caught my neighbor trying to open my apartment door. Should I be worried? Disclaimers and on my Storytime instead of me on Instagram. I knew he was going to talk my ear off, so I told him I was in a hurry and I had to go. And he says, "No worries, maybe we should catch up sometime." And I said, "Cool, bye." I did not say yes. A few hours later, I get on my Instagram and I see that he started following me. I wasn't super creeped out at this point. I was just like, okay, maybe he's just trying to be friendly. I instantly went and blocked him from seeing my stories. I didn't want him to keep tabs on me that way. Oh, also, I forgot to mention I work from home. And I do have 2 dogs. My dogs are always pretty quiet. I've never had a complaint about them. They really don't bark. Since I work from home, I walk them about 3 times a day. And remember, at this point, he doesn't know what floor I live on. At least I didn't think so. A few days later, I decided to go have dinner with one of my best friends. I left my apartment for literally 40 minutes because I try not to leave my dogs alone for too long. When I get off the elevator at my floor, I see the guy trying to open my door. He was pushing the door with his shoulder. I yelled at him from across the hallway and said, "What are you doing?" Then he looked shocked. Then he said, "Oh, sorry. I heard noise in your apartment and I wanted to make sure your dogs are okay." How does he know I have dogs? Part 3 is up. Caught my neighbor trying to open my apartment door. Should I be worried? Disclaimers not my Storytime instead of on Instagram. When I caught him red-handed trying to open my door, I asked him what he was doing. He said that he walked by and heard my dogs making really loud noises. And that he just wanted to make sure that they were okay. My dogs were making 0 noises. And how did he know I had 2 dogs? And how did he know what floor I lived on? I was officially creeped out. He saw the look on my face and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I was just trying to check on your dogs." That's when I told him that he didn't need to do that and that it was okay and he could leave now. That's when he started freaking out. He said, "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I can tell I made you uncomfortable and I feel like I've ruined everything." That's when I told him that he hadn't ruined anything because nothing was going on. Then he said, "Maybe you should give me your phone number so that if something like this happens again, I can just call you." I said no immediately. I told him he could leave again, and he walked away. He's halfway down the hallway and says, "Oh, we should still catch up for some coffee or something." What? I am concerned, but I don't know if I'm just freaking out for no reason. Could he have really been trying to help? Or am I right to think that he was trying to break in? I emailed my landlord and they said that they've never had a problem with him before. What the heck should I do?